Hello everyone, my name is Sonja Prokopec. I'm a professor of marketing at ESSEC Business School. My talk today is going to be about the pillars of luxury brand management. But I wanted to give you a little bit of a context about the ESSEC Business School and our expertise in luxury. So we are the first business school to ever open up a program dedicated to luxury brand management. This was the LVMH chair. This was done in partnership with the LVMH group in 1991. And it was the first program of this kind to ever be opened up in the world. And now this program is still ongoing, so 30 years later. And we have also, since then, opened up many different programs that are dedicated to luxury. It is also in our campus in Singapore that we have different programs where we expose students to at least some aspects of luxury, either through a class or through a project. And the way I teach luxury brand management is actually much more broad than the name implies. So my focus on when I speak about luxury brand management is that it's about the framework that you can apply to any brand that you want to position as a premium brand. So as long as you want to be positioned in the premium space, this type of framework and this type of topic would be of interest to you. So it's a very good branding exercise. It's a very good branding framework for as long as you don't position your brand on price. So if you're not a price leader, if you're not extremely cost efficient, and this is why consumers buy your brand, and then this is basically a lot of these elements you can apply to what you are doing in your branding. Okay, so this is a little bit about ESSEC. And as far as I'm concerned, I've been a professor at ESSEC. This is my 13th year, of which I spent 9 years in France. And then in end of 2016, I moved to Singapore, and I've been on the Singapore campus trying to do a lot of different activities that are related to the luxury industry, including teaching different courses, managing different projects, working with companies, and so on. So it's my pleasure to share with you some insights about what differentiates luxury brand management from traditional FMCG type of management or branding. Okay, so this will be my topic for today. So when we think about, for example, how can a macaron company like La Durée, which exists in Singapore, can manage to create a premium appeal or a premium pricing as well, premium branding for a good quality, let's say, macarons, but nonetheless macarons that we are happy to pay premium dollars for. How can they do it in a way that in our mind it is actually worth it to go and spend and buy and enjoy the products as compared to, for example, a brand like Toblerone, which we normally buy in the supermarkets. It is also how we think about these products. We think about them as an experience. We are more likely to buy them to reward ourselves, and we are also very likely to buy them as a gift. So what are the fundamental pillars that differentiate this type of branding that makes us fundamentally believe or have this dream, desire, and buy these products that give us this type of experience? So in luxury brand management, we say that there are 6 fundamental pillars of luxury brand management. So I'm going to tell you what they are, and then I'm going to go through all 6 of them with some examples to illustrate to you a little bit more specifically what it actually means. Okay, so the first pillar is positioning by uniqueness. So that means you're not comparing yourself to other competitors in the space and trying to find a space for you to position yourself in. It is rather the other way around. So you think about what makes you unique as a brand, and then you position on that uniqueness. Second pillar relates to the brand DNA and brand codes. Okay, so brand DNA is basically genetic composition of the brand, but when we talk about creating luxury or premium brands, we often think about a more complex brand DNA. So I will speak a little bit more in details about how do you create a more complex DNA, what is an examples of some brands in terms of their brand DNAs, and also how do we then actually communicate that DNA to our customers is through visual codes, which we call visual codes of the brand, which we call subtle signals. Okay, so it can be, there are a few different names for it. You can think about it as, for example, what are the things that you recognize the brand for that are not necessarily logos, but are clearly linked with that particular brand. Okay. Pillar number 3 is storytelling. So storytelling is extremely well done in the luxury industry. It is a very, very powerful way to create the dream, to make the consumer immerse themselves into the story of your brand, and to fundamentally want to create the desire to want to buy your brand. Okay. Number 4 is balancing between the image and the growth. So a lot of brands, when they are created, when they manage to create desire, when they are on top of the mind in terms of the appeal and the dream factor for the consumers, they often also have to think about growing in different categories. Okay, so you have to think. So it's a very tricky situation, because you have to think about how you manage to keep that dream alive, but at the same time grow in different categories, which sometimes might dilute your brand. Okay, so for example, if you go in a lot, if you introduce a lot of lower end extensions that are more easier to purchase. So what it means is lower entry barriers in terms of price. Maybe this would be a very successful option for you, very commercial option as a brand in a short term, but it might create dilution, and therefore the brand might lose value in the long term. So, so this is very important, to balance between staying relevant at the same time growing your brand, okay, through different categories and keeping that desire alive. Okay. Pillar number 5 is the future of tradition. What that means is that what we see a lot of the luxury brands today tend to be quite old. Okay, so the true luxury brands. This is not necessarily all the brands, because we also see a lot of emergence of new brands that are being very good in their branding, and they're able to speak the narrative to the consumers that the consumers find appealing. But if we look at a lot of true luxury brands, we'll see that a lot of them are at least a few decades old, and sometimes even not more than 100, 150, 200 years old, depending on the category, depending on the brand. So how can a brand that is that old stay relevant in today's society? So it's very important to, again, understand your customer and understand how you can adapt your brand to the customer's needs and the customer's expectations today, without necessarily losing the value or being inconsistent with the brand DNA that you have as a strategy for your brand. Okay. And pillar number 6 is related to integrated retail, which means that you bring that uniqueness, that authentic DNA and visual codes, and also your storytelling into the retail atmosphere. So retail is a very important way of actually building that desire for the brand if it's done well. It's a very important element in creating that dream factor, because you can actually embed all of those things, all of those aspects around the brand into the retail atmosphere. So when the customer is in the store, they can really feel the special universe that you have created around your brand. So these are the 6 pillars. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into each of the pillars with some examples, with some more concrete explanations. And you will also see some of the examples in this video. As I'm speaking about the examples, there will be images and slides showing up. Okay, so I hope you're interested to see more, and that we can that you will find the rest of this talk interesting. Okay. So to speak about the first pillar a little bit more broadly and in more depth, it is about positioning by uniqueness, not by comparison. So what this means is that you create such a unique DNA and universe around the brand that the consumer doesn't actually compare you with other brands, but they think about you as a unique brand in its own right. So a lot of luxury brands have managed to do this in a way that we don't really apply positioning maps to some of the categories where luxury brands play. We think of them really as individual brands with its own world, universe, and things that they bring to the table. So uniqueness means also that, for example, if I always use this example that you see on the screen. These are 2 champagne glasses that you have in the picture, and these are identical when we pour them into a glass. You would not know which champagne is on the left and which champagne is on the right. So if a consumer is only buying the actual product and not everything else that comes around the brand, they would not be able to differentiate much between the brands, and therefore they would not put value on the brand. They would not choose one brand versus another brand, or some of the factors that they would use to choose would be things like what is on promotion, which brand is on promotion, or which one has a lower price. But the brands manage to create these unique universes around them so that you actually, or a consumer, chooses specifically a brand that speaks to them rather than looking at some of the other factors that I mentioned already. So if I am a champagne lover, or even if I'm just a consumer of champagne and I like, for example, some of the nice French champagnes, I would know that the universe of Veuve Clicquot has a very different universe or narrative or storytelling or brand DNA, brand codes around it than the universe of Dom Perignon. And therefore, these 2 champagnes, even though fundamentally in a glass they look exactly the same, they're actually vastly different in the consumer's mind. So this is what positioning by uniqueness actually means. Now, this leads us to pillar number 2, which is basically creation of your DNA or the brand's DNA and the brand codes. Okay, so the brand DNA is the same way we are as humans, with our own unique set of elements that make us who we are. We have to think about our brand as a brand that has to showcase more than just one thing. A traditional branding model often proposes or suggests that for example, we think of a brand related to one key element. So for example, when we say Nike, we think performance, okay? But this is a traditional model, which is actually more applicable to mass brands. If we want to think about our brand and position our brand as a more premium or more luxury brand, we have to then think about it a little bit and give it a little bit more depth. Okay, so you cannot think about your brand as meaning just one thing. You have to think about it as at least having 4 unique elements. Okay, so these elements don't necessarily need to be unique, each one of them, but combination of these 4 elements together needs to be unique to your brand and not to any other brand. Okay. So this is actually an LVMH model that was established in 2000 and has become the industry standard since then. These 4 elements can be concrete. So they can, for example, speak to your know-how, specific know-how. They could speak to your, for example, your history or your heritage or something about the founder. They can speak about where you source your ingredients, for example. But they can also be abstract. So they can, for example, speak about the values that you uphold in a company, or the way you see your target customer, the values that you bring to the table, the values that, for example, the founder had. And so some brands are created entirely around the founder, one single founder. Even though these founders might have died long time ago, the brand's desire and dream are built all around this one person. And then they are replenished and they're made new again and again. But that core, that brand DNA is always there. It is an internal strategy, so this is not to be shared with the customers. It is really used to guide the brand towards to be consistent, to build a complex universe around the brand, but also to give brand a meaning, a soul, and to be able to create that dream. So for example, we were talking about champagne earlier. So here's how, when we think about the brand DNA of Veuve Clicquot is a French champagne. It was founded by Madame Clicquot, who was a widow. So this is what Veuve stands for. And she was very young at the time when she inherited this brand. So she was only 27 years old. But she was very determined. So the entire brand is actually built around her character. So it was a feminine brand built around a female founder. She was very determined, very creative and innovative. She had a few inventions in her time which are still used today. But she was full of life, and this is what also the brand fully puts forward. So this joy for life, it's a very joyful and at ease brand. And she also had a statement which was only one quality, the finest. So this means that of course the quality of the product is essential and the brand cannot exist without it. Of course, you can think about the fact that many brands claim, for example, quality, but this combination of elements, a female founder, very determined, who's also very creative and innovative, this joy for joyous energy, joy for life, and all together with the quality product is what makes Veuve Clicquot have a very original DNA. But how do you actually showcase this DNA? So as I said before, it is something that's internal to you, to your company, to your other employees, so that everyone is on the same page in terms of their marketing strategy. So this is what we use visual codes for. So these are representations of the brand that are visual, and that the consumer can get to know by repetition and recognize as unique to your brand and no other brand. Okay, so the codes here are some examples that I'll share with you. So for example, a code could be a shape. Okay, so the shape could be a shape of a bottle. It could be a shape of a label on the bottle. It could be, for example, a pattern. Okay, so you see here some examples coming on the screen. It could be a specific animal that we recognize as linked to the brand. So we all know, for example, Kenzo, tiger, or Gucci, bee, or for example, even made-up characters like Fendi Monster Eyes. Then it could be, for example, a specific type of a material. So it could be, for example, the way Bottega Veneta brand uses their leather technique. It's called intrecciato. So it's two layers of the leather that are weaved in together to create that beautiful coat that Bottega Veneta is known for. Okay, so these are just some of the examples. Of course, it could be color. Color is usually a primary code. So going back again to Veuve Clicquot, orange is a color they're known for. Then we of course have some nice examples of Tiffany's actually owning their own color, Tiffany blue, or for example Christian Louboutin, red soul, and so on and so on. I'm sure that if you are interested in this topic, and if you are perhaps a luxury consumer or aspiring luxury consumer, you would recognize some of these codes right away. So what is important to know about the codes is that they can be linked, they can represent anything, as you could hear from my examples, as long as they are particular to you and not to the category. So this cannot be something that represents another brand. It has to be linked to your brand. You can have many codes, you can change your codes, you can decide, for example, that you want to retire a code and introduce a new code. So that's possible. That actually replenishes the brand, whereas a DNA is something that cannot be changed. Okay, so codes can be changed, even of course it is not advisable to change them very, very often, because you still need to create that link in the customer's mind, and that takes a lot of marketing resources, because as I said, it's by repetition. So if you keep repeating the code over and over again, in the ads, in the products, in, for example, the stores, in packaging, that's how the consumer learns that this is your code. So it takes a lot of effort and a lot of marketing resources to actually get that link in the consumer's mind. Okay, so that is fundamentally how you position your brand as unique through a very, very unique and authentic brand DNA and brand codes. Okay, brand codes is one way to represent your brand DNA. Another way is through powerful storytelling. So storytelling is everything in the luxury industry. They are beautiful stories that are built around the brands, and some of these stories are really true. A lot of them are sometimes embellished, because consumers actually don't mind necessarily a little bit of an addition to the dream factor. Often we have, we really like the universe that the brand has created, and are not fact checkers checking every single thing that is within the story. But what's nice about these stories is that this is the way that the consumers actually transport themselves into this world. This is what we call narrative transportation. When you're immersed into a story, and this story is a mythos, or this beautiful universe the brand has created, in a consumer's mind, they're transported into this story, and this is what really helps create that dream factor and create that desire for the brand. So some of the things that stories will do is they make the brand more aspirational. They give legitimacy to the brand, because a lot of times in your stories you might share about the craftsmanship behind the brand, you might share about the artisans who actually make the products, you might share about the artistic director, you might share about the regional founder. So it really makes the consumer believe why you have this authentic, beautiful brand, and why your products are exceptional, because you were sharing all these stories with them. It also is an excellent way to communicate. So there gives you a lot of content, and consumers love content. They're especially interesting content, unique, authentic content that is relevant to your brand. So it gives you a lot of ways that you can have unique content that is about your brand, but is also very interesting and different than your competitors. Finally, so it allows the consumer to build a personal relationship a little bit with the brand. They feel like part of the brand, and ultimately it allows the brand to charge higher margins or higher prices, because consumers' attitude towards the brand and the desire that the brand curated increases their willingness to pay. Okay, so when you are able to create that type of a brand dream, you are giving value to the consumers of why your brand is priced the way it is priced. Okay, so if we look for one of the best examples of storytelling is Christian Dior. So the Christian Dior DNA is entirely built around Christian Dior, the founder, and he was only in charge of the brand for the first 10 years or so before his death, but the brand DNA is built around him, and the entire spirit of Dior is around Christian Dior. So they have many beautiful stories about him as a person, his approach, his beliefs, and they have made many stories out of it that are also used as inspirations within the collections, and are also used to create beautiful visual codes. Okay, so for example, one of the very well-known visual codes of Christian Dior is what you will see here on the picture next to me is a canache motif. And you can see that this has been used in many different product categories, including, of course, shoes, ready to wear, but also makeup, jewelry, leather accessories, and so on. And what's interesting about the origins of this canache motif is that it was actually a stitching that was used on the chairs of his first fashion show. So there is a story behind everything, and this is what we enjoy as consumers and what we fall in love with. For the other stories, for example, that he was a very superstitious person. So one of the visual codes is a star. So you can see in some of the flagship stores, like for example, the one in Tokyo, there's a star on top of the flagship store. He was also loved women, loved flowers. So he has a few flowers that are strongly linked to the brand today. That were flowers that he had in his garden in Normandy, etc., etc. So this is there, but there are other brands as well that do beautiful storytelling, and storytelling is really the best way to create desire. Today we're entering more and more a digital world, but nonetheless we have to find a way as brands to be able to transmit this type of storytelling, this type of narrative in a digital way as well. And be able to share this kind of personal relationship that you would have in a retail store, and also with a retail sales advisor, who are usually well trained, at least about their brand stories, to be able to do it in a digital way. So the fourth pillar is how to manage growth and brand image at the same time. So a lot of luxury brands have to grow and they have to extend into different categories. And they sometimes also have to think about how to stay relevant despite, for example, their long history and so on. So the fourth and the fifth pillar are very much intertwined. So how do you manage extending into different categories and at the same time staying desirable and staying maintaining your brand value? Well, many brands suffer from different challenges, and they have to react quickly or to be able to speak the language of the consumers. Also many brands decide to handle growth differently. Some brands really choose to stay more smaller, more niche, and while others don't feel or manage the growth into different categories successfully, in some cases also unsuccessfully. One of the things we are seeing is that, for example, extending into sub-brands. So, for example, at one point, for a long time, Burberry had multiple layers of sub-brands within the Burberry brand. Armani still maintains, I think, 5 or 6 different sub-brands under the Armani umbrella. Marc by Marc Jacobs had Jacobs had a sub-brand, Marc by Marc Jacobs. So these have been shown to be quite harmful to the overall brand desire, because the consumers don't really necessarily understand the different ways, different sub-brands. And if you make it too accessible without really having a clear image or flagship products at the very top, consumers think of you more as a sub-brand or the sub-brand offers, rather than the desirable brand that's at the top of your umbrella branding. So it's very, very important to create your desire of your brand at the very top. This is where how you can actually manage extending into different categories without losing your brand desire. At the same time, you have to keep your relevancy. So this could be about what kind of positioning you want to have, but it also could be related to pillar 5, which is managing your heritage. So, for example, in the Louis Vuitton has done several different rebrandings over the past 10 years, or even more than 10 years today. So for a while they had a very loud image, so to speak, and then you can see some of the examples of the ads here. And then in 2008, when the recession hit, the consumer behavior drastically shifted. So the consumers didn't want to, they were much more interested into timelessness, more classic looks. Discreet luxury is what was desirable. So Louis Vuitton really turned around and did a complete change in terms of the positioning, the muse they chose, the way they displayed their products, the product quality, the product price. So it was actually, but they started to position themselves much more on the top. So not to have so many, for example, monogram products, but to create more high quality leather products with subtle logos, subtle codes that were obviously higher priced. Different brand ambassadors, and that was their strategy for a while. Then, of course, it was this street style logomania that we all entered before the COVID-19 crisis, which was ongoing for also already a couple of years. And the interesting thing is that they were the first one to really create a collaboration with Supreme, which is considered the best collaboration of all time still to today, It was completely contrary to the image that they were before pursuing. But it was actually not contrary at all. It was just that they were keeping the brand relevant in the narrative of the consumer and the consumer trends in which all the brands were moving in. So they were really very innovative and very creative in that aspect. And that also these types of collaborations that they started sort of this trend is today the best way for brands to keep relevant, to keep interesting, to create products that are more desirable, because it brings together two brands and it creates a unique and limited, usually edition products, so gives consumers something else to discover that is still consistent with the original brand, but it keeps the brand very fresh. And that's one way that you can keep also the brand lively and the brand fresh in the eyes of the consumer, despite regardless of how old your brand actually is. So the age of the brand is not as important. It is more important how the brand reacts to the consumer trends and the consumer challenges. So you can see many different examples of collaborations, and some brands have done extensive collaborations with different designers. Usually collaborations can be different types of forms. It can be with another brand, it can be with an artist. So for example, Dom Perignon does collaborations with artists. Rimowa, the luggage, nice, beautiful German brand, premium luggage brand. They have done interesting collaborations with Fendi, with Supreme, with Off-White. Creating products that really spark desire and joy. So this keeps the brand very fresh, not boring, because you're creating new products that are in combination with another brand. And usually there's a good synergy between the brands for these collaborations. Sometimes you also have to think about how consumers consume your product to stay relevant. So for example, their Hennessy is a cognac, a French cognac, that is traditionally drank as a digestive after dinner. But for a lot of cultures, this is not the relevant way anymore. It is a more traditional way to drink it. And what also we have been seeing for a while now in the wines and spirits industry is that a lot of consumers want to experiment. They don't want to be told how to drink or use a product or consume a product. They don't want to be, they don't want boundaries. They don't want to be put into a box. They want to experiment. They want to be free. They want to have to abide by any rules. This is the millennials. So it's probably includes some of you, and probably in the audience who are viewing this, maybe some parents, and most of you are probably going to be in well, depending what program you're looking for, it could be Generation Z or Millennials. So what a lot of wines and spirits companies have done, like Hennessy, they have embraced this trend and started creating, for example, cocktails with cognac. And they have started training bartenders and creating cocktail competitions and creating content on their social media and their website. You know, how do you consume, coming up with the better recipes and so on. So really trying to stay relevant to what the consumers want and not so much dictating what the brand wants. And the last pillar for today is the integrated retail distribution. So this basically relates to bringing all of that we've just discussed. So your brand DNA, your visual codes, your storytelling, your uniqueness, your brand uniqueness, bringing that into the retail sphere. This is where you create desire. This is how you bring that uniqueness, that myth around your brand to the consumers. Of course, retail is very powerful if it is done well. and if it's not done well, it can be a huge cost for the brand. So but if you do retail well, and retail, what I mean by retail is not necessarily just a store. It could be a branded corner, for example, what we see in airports. It could be also for example, pop-up shops. There's a lot of pop-up shops that have been opening in the past few years, and they're a very nice way to again keep your brand fresh, bring some unique brand experience to the consumers, bring your brand to the top of mind for consumers, because obviously you will be opening it up in maybe locations where you not normally would have a retail shop, but at the same time is very cost efficient as well. And so you can bring all those visual codes to the environment, to the retail environment that you are in. For example, again, going back to my example of Christian Dior stores are filled with codes that really exemplify the life of Christian Dior, and that create a beautiful, very recognizable environment that makes you feel the dream of the brand, or that the brand has created. So here are some, again, images that show you how they have made the retail environment or have brought the brand to the retail environment. So this is all from me. These are the 6 pillars that are unique, specific to luxury brand management, that you can also apply in if you are really working for any brand that is considering themselves to be a premium brand. What I always say is that it doesn't matter if you're a yogurt, but you're considering yourself to be in the premium category. Some of these pillars would be applicable to you. So I hope you enjoyed this talk. You can also find out more about us, I guess, in the information that's available in the postgraduate fair. I hope you are staying safe and healthy, and best of luck in all your decisions regarding to your future studies or whatever you decide to do. Bye.